record button. And today's webinar, again, is entitled The Sustainability Problem and Invitation. Our presenter is Anton Camarota of Tellari and the University of Denver. I'm going to read the announcement for the benefit of those listening later to the recording. The announcement started with a quote from comedian John Oliver, who says, "Nobody knows what sustainability means, but we feel good when we say it." This presentation today addresses the problem of sustainability in general and sustainability education in particular. The limitations of several current sustainability frameworks will be presented, and the social trap of educating within currently accepted worldviews will be described. Anton will define a grounded philosophy that will enable sustainability leaders to overcome these barriers. Participants in this webinar, all of you who have pre-registered, will be invited to take part in an educational pilot project in association with Jeff Bridges and his latest film, Living in the Future's Past. All of you who pre-registered received a link, a URL, so that you could access a set of background materials related to Anton's presentation and the film Living in the Future's Past. To introduce Anton and then turn it over to him, Anton Camarota is Executive Director of Tellari, a consultancy dedicated to helping business leaders build sustainable companies. Dr. Camarota has more than 2 decades of business advising experience with Fortune 1000, as well as numerous emerging companies and small businesses. An internationally published author of 5 books, Anton has most recently written The 1,000-Year Company, which defines a comprehensive agenda for long-term business operations. A nationally recognized speaker, Dr. Camarota offers keynotes and training sessions on leadership and management to a wide variety of organizations. He is a faculty member at the University of Denver and Colorado State University, where he teaches graduate-level classes in research methods, management systems analysis, and sustainable business leadership. Dr. Camarota's current research centers on defining the best practices for business longevity, including strategies that build long-term resilience and adaptability. I'm pleased to turn it over to my longtime friend and colleague, Anton Camarota.
Thank you, Ira. Thank you for that introduction. I'd like to welcome all of you to the webinar today. I really appreciate your presence, and we're going to be talking about a topic which is near and dear to me, as well as very timely. Our agenda today is relatively straightforward, and I'm going to pause at a few points during this presentation so that we can take a look at what your ideas are around what you consider to be the sustainability problem. We're going to look at education as a solution. If you'll notice, I have that as a question rather than a statement. I want to talk a little bit about what we call the social systems trap. And then finally, I'd like to give you an invitation to start using a teaching tool around sustainability, which is the latest film that you can access generally through your networks at your libraries, at your schools. And so let's just jump right into this. I know that some of you had a couple of questions around what exactly the sustainability problem is. And in fact, defining exactly what the problem is itself a problem. We can start by looking at what the United Nations has defined as elements of the sustainability problem at a societal level. And we were looking at this framework from the standpoint of, does it really provide an effective agenda to transform the world. Well, in one aspect, yes, it does. It provides a set of goals. It provides a set of measurements that are all agreed upon by a wide variety of stakeholders. It is an integrated framework that, if implemented properly, would result in a more sustainable society and a more sustainable world. Now, that's the good news. Now, the problem is that these elements have not been implemented consistently, and in fact, in some countries, we're falling backwards. Just this week, actually on Monday, there was a report, the Global Assessment Report on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. As part of this report, it gave a scorecard on how well we're doing on these 17 goals. For the majority of them, we're moving backwards, which is kind of sad. And so for the others, there's either not enough information or we're moving forward very slowly. One of the aspects of the problem in relative to this framework is that in our societies, we're really not geared towards a comprehensive agenda like this. We're geared towards keeping our society intact based on what we consider to be our own priorities. And so we have a rather global breakdown because all countries have not adopted this framework consistently. Just as an aside, the media has sort of latched onto this, and they've seen that we have 1 million species that are currently going extinct or becoming extinct. Now, one of the parts of this report, as I said, is an assessment of how well we're doing on these goals. But there's another part of this report, and I would like you to read it if you have a chance. It is a set of solutions, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about this as we get on further in the webinar. But the solutions really align with what I'm going to be telling you today in terms of what really is driving our failure to adopt this set of goals as a national and international agenda. So this is one part of our problem. We've got a nice framework. It really would work if we all approached it in the same way and adopted it as a comprehensive agenda, but we're not doing so.
Anton?
Yes?
Question, are you still talking off of your title slide, or should the slides have been advancing?
Oh, the slides should be advanced. They're not advancing?
No, they are not.
Okay.
Still on the title slide, so you might want to advance them on your desktop. We are seeing whatever is on your desktop, so and I'm still seeing your title slide.
Okay, hold on.
Try again to go into presentation mode.
Okay, I'll stop sharing, and then what I'll do, let me go back to presentation mode. File. Okay, slideshow. How is that?
I can see it. I expect that others can see now the full screen version. So why don't you proceed and see if you can go quickly through the slides.
Okay, that should be, you should be seeing the Sustainable Development Goals.
Still,
Are you seeing the Sustainable Development Goals slide?
no.
Okay, well, how about now?
Nope.
Okay, let's see. I should be sharing. It says this one, application window. So You're not seeing the slides at all?
No, I'm gonna pull it up, Anton, and I'll advance your slides from my screen.
Okay. They're saying they're saying to see them now. Okay. They say okay. We're getting some messages saying that they actually see them. So
Okay, well, continue on then. Apologies for
okay.
the problems.
Okay. I guess let me see here. All right. Let me go down to the next one. Can everybody see the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board slide? Ira, if you follow on.
It's still on the SDGs. It may just be that there's a tremendous lag for some reason on your system.
Yeah, I don't understand why we're not getting. Maybe you want to load these slides, and I'll just have you advance them for us.
Hang on, I'm going to take the presenter mode back. Okay, now I've got your slide, your title slide up.
All right. If we just go to the third slide.
Okay.
Great. All right, great, Ira. If you just advance them, everybody can see them now. Good. Great. All right. Well, thank you, Ira. The Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations are really at a societal level, and one of the aspects of the sustainability problem that makes it so difficult to resolve is that it exists at multiple levels. It exists, first of all, at a social and societal level, and second of all, it exists at an organizational level, at an institutional level. From a business standpoint, one of the frameworks for sustainability is being put forth. Oops, I think we got to go back one. There we go. One of the frameworks for sustainability is put forth by the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board. And one of the things that we can notice immediately about this is that the variety of issues is very similar, first of all, to the Sustainable Development Goals, but yet it's been pared down and tailored for business organizations. However, these elements, again, are very broad in nature, and another aspect of the problem is that there's really not any one person who can possess all of the expertise needed to manage these effectively. And so the imperative here becomes to it becomes to ingrain sustainability as a core element of any organization. And so the management of sustainability, which is the second part of the sustainability problem, is not only is a difficult endeavor, but it really is something that has not yet been adapted truly by a wide variety of organizations. It's starting to be adapted. And what we see here is that this framework, along with other frameworks like the GRI and some of the other reporting frameworks, is initially about becoming less bad rather than doing good. And so this really is a transitional framework at best. It's a partial framework, and it comes with its own set of issues around organizations that really require a lot of expertise in different areas, and it requires mainstreaming sustainability within an organization, which simply has not happened in most organizations. If you could advance to the next slide. Great. One of the one of the aspects around organizations that form a part of the problem, oh, we got to go back up, there we go, is that many organizations are adopting their own frameworks because there are so many frameworks out there that currently exist. It's really kind of confusing. In my class on reporting, environmental reporting, we look at about 7 or 8 of the major different frameworks, but there's also a lot of other ones. And so what organizations are doing is they're finding that these one-size-fits-all approaches really aren't effective, and they're developing their own approaches to sustainability, which may or may not align with some of these other frameworks. So second part of the problem from an organizational standpoint is that we have a proliferation of frameworks. And so the proliferation is really causing a lot of issues because there's not a common understanding as to exactly what has to be done to generate a sustainable organization. If you could go to the next slide, please. Finally, the third aspect, major aspect of the sustainability problem is on the personal level. On a personal level, the United Nations has also developed something they call the Lazy Person's Guide to Saving the World. Now, these are 4 different, like what they call levels of activities. These are some things that are relatively simple to do. However, the guide really doesn't provide a lot of motivation for doing them. I mean, these are great ideas. Yes, they are about being more sustainable. But a lot of these are also about incurring additional personal costs on your activities individually throughout your life and within your household, within your neighborhood, and at your business organization. They're not really about systemic change, although they could induce systemic change. And the real problem here is what is the source of motivation to take this on? So at a societal level, we see inconsistent implementation with the Sustainable Development Goals because they are not really mirroring the agenda of individual nations. At an organizational level, we see the proliferation of multiple frameworks for sustainability, and hence a lack of understanding as to what exactly it means. And we also see from the proliferation of frameworks, we also see many different approaches to sustainability, which may or may not be compatible with each other. And finally, at a personal level, we see that there's really not a whole lot of motivation. There's some motivation, but not a whole lot to take on some of these activities. So next slide, please. One of the solutions that's recommended, and it's actually a sustainable development goal, is education. And this is why I'm involved in education, as probably many of you are, around sustainability, because we feel like we can make a difference. This table comes up with there's some interesting conclusions we can draw from this. First of all, managing sustainability is about managing capital. It's about managing stocks in systems as well as flows. We haven't done a very good job at our capital management, either on a social level or on an organizational level. And so it's really important to make some distinctions here around what types of capital we're talking about maintaining and sustaining. So this table really illustrates we've got 5 basic forms of capital that go into our living environment: our natural ecosystems capital, the human capital, our manufactured capital, our social capital, and then our knowledge capital. You can see there that the key elements for each form of capital are listed, but perhaps the most important part of this framework, and why I present it, is the third column, the academic disciplines column. Now, this column is very interesting because in my experience in education, sustainability tends to be grounded in one of these, one or perhaps maybe 2 of these departments. And the skills and the knowledge that are put forth within a particular department are generally very adequate, especially departments that are focused on research and doctoral studies, are very adequate around managing a particular form of capital that's relevant to the topic area in that particular department. For example, in the natural and ecosystems form of capital, conservation biology, natural resources, ecological, environmental economics, all deal relatively straightforwardly with that form, managing that form of capital: land, water, minerals, climate. Now, the geography department, the folks that are in there may not really have the expertise to understand how to manage social capital. So what we see is that there is a grounding generally for sustainability studies in one or two departments. And this, because of the specialization of the departments and the siloing effect, is influencing education. It's actually less effective than it can be, because as we saw with the Sustainable Development Goals, true sustainability at a social level is very integrative. It's also true at an organization level. And so in our education systems, we have sort of a built-in failure here, because we're grounding our sustainability studies in one particular department or one particular area, when in reality, sustainability, when viewed from a wider perspective, really needs to include multiple forms of capital, at least an understanding of how the activities of an organization or an individual or a society are impacting these forms of capital, and establishing a literacy around managing these stocks. And that right now, with the siloed structure of many schools, this is very difficult. And so this is beginning to break down. We're starting to see some sustainability programs emerge. However, just the very vastness of the topics that are required is rather daunting. So what we're seeing is that the sustainability studies are kind of sputtering a little bit. They're beginning to emerge. They're struggling with the integrative aspects of managing multiple forms of capital and giving people the knowledge and the skills necessary for managing those as part of being an engaged citizen in a sustainable society. So next slide, please. I think we might have, okay, we're good. One of the aspects that we can look at here in terms of education is how we can overcome the siloing effect. And there's an approach that I am posing here as a solution, and I'd like some feedback from you all, perhaps in the chat area, in terms of what you think of this approach, because I have found it to be very effective, and I've seen that some schools are starting to adopt it. It's basically the answers to the who, what, when, where, and why questions. And sustainability education, where does it take place? Well, it's an interdisciplinary approach, and it really is an effective education program is about multiple forms of knowledge and being at a level that you can interact with these forms of knowledge in a way that you can demonstrate critical thinking and understanding of various assumptions that go into the different fields. So where sustainability education needs to take place is not really anywhere. It needs to take place everywhere. It's interdisciplinary. The who is what I consider probably the most important, because the who is a self-knowledge approach. The who is who are you as a leader? What's important to you? Why do you even care about sustainability? Why don't you just go ahead and just live your life and not worry about it? Well, once you elucidate your core values and beliefs, then you can understand your motivation. And so part of sustainability education really needs to be about educating the individual, giving them the self-awareness so that they can function within an interdisciplinary approach. The next slide, please. This is another rather interesting approach, because it's really about how to think. What we used in our daily thinking is really a more or less a collection of heuristics, or what an NLP speaking, it's called metaprograms. And so this is how to think about interdisciplinary subjects. And the first area really needs to be systems thinking and understanding of interconnectedness. And systems thinking is different. It's really a way of looking at the world as a set of interlocking elements that provide what they call an emerging phenomenon from the system. Intended and unintended consequences. Ways to do this: you can use case studies, you can use problem-based learning. But this really has an emphasis, it's taught generally in computer science classes and some information systems classes, but it's not really, hasn't been really expanded to a wider variety of areas. And this is a very important heuristic, because when we start looking at the world through the systems lens, we start understanding why things are functioning the way they are, what kind of impacts we're having, and why these impacts are emerging. The second competency is about long-term foresighted thinking. This is about looking beyond maybe our own lifetime, looking about intergenerational issues, equity, looking at the long-term impacts. Well, one of the big issues right now, especially around societies, is social planning. I mean, how long should a society plan for being in existence? Should we plan for 100 years? Should we plan for 500? Should we plan for 1,000? Should we plan for 10,000? Societies such as the United States tend not to embrace social planning. And so as a default, we kind of go back to the Wall Street, the quarterly reports, and maybe a year or maybe a 5-year plan, something like that. The real problem here is that a lot of the changes that are going on in our ecosystems, and especially the diminishment of ecosystem services, take place over a much longer time period. And so the changes that are necessary really are going to have to be passed down through the generations. We're going to be looking at an intergenerational problem here. And so long-term foresighted thinking is really key. The third heuristic or metaprogram is looking at organizations as a nexus of stakeholders. And so from your personal perspective, you also engage with stakeholders, but your organizations are really a nexus of stakeholder-based decisions. And the job of the executive managers is to decide what priority should we place on these stakeholders, and how much information should we gather and include in our decision making around where we want to take the organization. There are a lot of different approaches to stakeholder engagement and group collaboration. This is one of the drivers for team learning in higher education. Finally, the report that came out on Monday, the Global Assessment Report on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, really makes it very clear that we are drawing down all the forms of capital on which we rely on for making our lives successful and building a quality of life in our communities and in our societies. This means that the fourth skill is very important, because we really need to transform what we're doing out there in the world, and how we're behaving individually, how we behave in organizations, and what we're asking our societies to do. And so the real core skill here is about becoming a change agent, understanding how to manage change and how to lead change in organizations, in our communities, and even to influence people at a higher level in our societies about obtaining change and obtaining what we want to see based on a vision of the future. And this is really a leadership task. Okay, next slide, please. Finally, the what. We can't all function in everything or every area of every area of endeavor all the time. We have to select something in which we find satisfaction, in which our skills are recognized, and in which we apply our strengths. So we need discipline-specific skills. Not only do we need to be able to apply the heuristics, Not only do we need to have some motivation, know who we are, and see the interconnectedness among all different elements, we need to perform in certain areas. And so the discipline-specific skills are very important. Now, what many educational programs have done is focused on this to the exclusion of other ways of thinking. But in my experience, in my research, the other ways of learning are a priority. If you have discipline-specific skills without a good understanding of exactly why you're doing it, or seeing the multi-dimensional impacts of what you're doing, then you're really not able to participate meaningfully in a sustainability effort. Okay, next slide, please. Now this is where we have a slight interactive session of the presentation. I would like to ask you, based on the four social systems we see here: Gaianism, communalism, accommodation, and intervention, which system do you think is most appropriate for a sustainable future? Please type your response in the chat box. Good. We see intervention, combination of Gaianism and communalism, intervention. Good. Communalism. Good. Okay, good. This is good. We're getting some responses. Again, which system or approach, which worldview do you think is, I think Matt is onto something here. Very good. And Linda also. Well, good. Okay, we've got some responses. That was actually a trick question. I didn't mean to trick you, but I kind of did. One of the important aspects of education is that education exists within a social system. It exists within a society. Whether we like it or not, education adopts the underlying values and beliefs of our society. And therefore, education in different societies and in different schools is imparting a different set of values. It's imparting a different view of the world. In highly developed countries and in technical institutes, we see that the schools tend to be centered in technocentrism, accommodation and intervention. In some perhaps smaller or liberal arts schools, we see more of an emphasis on Gaianism, communalism, or ecocentric approaches. What's really important about this was the survey that was done around this, in that the majority of people are in developed countries have a technocentric worldview. This means that they have faith in the adaptability of the institutions and approaches to assessment and evaluation to accommodate environmental demands. We can adapt, right? Our intervention, or an interventionist approach. No matter what we do, we are the supreme beings. Humans are above all. We can control nature. We can create giant 5,000 or 10,000 kilometer wide solar shields and prevent the heating of the earth. We can, dye the oceans green if we want to, or we can make artificial fish, that kind of a thing. Well, the real problem here is that the majority of our educational institutions are in a social systems trap. We're stuck in a technocentric worldview. However, what's really important is that, yes, what the trick question brings out, at some point, all elements of these four approaches are necessary. In other words, we need to know how to accommodate. We need to know how to intervene when appropriate. We also need to know when to cooperate and when competition is appropriate. And then we also need to understand that the natural world, we have to have faith in the rights of nature and the need for a coevolution of human and natural ethics and systems. And so what we've got is an unbalanced world. One of the barriers here, which is implicit in a technocentric worldview, is that the systems and the institutions that we've set up, once they gain power, they like to hold on to it. They're not about to give up without a fight. And so this presents another core part of the sustainability problem is that we have, not only do we have a rather small percentage of society dedicated to ecocentrism and understanding some of the impacts we're having here on our natural world and the multiple forms of capital, but we also are looking at being locked in to the majority, the majority opinion in terms of the power structures of society. And this is really something that any sustainability education program has to address. You have to understand what are the structures of power, who has them, why do they exist, and what are they achieving in the world. And right now, what they're achieving is a tremendous inequality of distributed wealth, along with destruction and decline of our natural systems that support life. And so it's important to, first of all, acknowledge that, yes, many of our educational systems are stuck within the social systems traps that we ourselves have created by acknowledging and implicitly accepting the power structures of our societies. But at the same time, it's also important to acknowledge that maybe we need to have a more balanced approach to our education systems in terms of all four worldviews, and be able to maybe switch between them or pick and choose elements that really support an overall agenda, such as the Sustainable Development Goals. And now I'd like to bring you, if we can, next slide, I'd like to invite you to use an educational tool. Jeff Bridges has created a rather interesting movie. You guys should be able to see it. Most of you, your libraries will offer it if you have a Canopy or other film database access. It's really about what kind of future people are going to create. As I said before, the sustainability problem, because it really requires long-term thinking, may be generational. And even though I hate to admit it, perhaps the folks in our current generation are perhaps too fixed in our mindsets to really see things clearly and to really make the kind of really radical changes that are necessary in order to reorient the world and its societies to a more sustainable way of living. Okay, next slide, please. In this film, Jeff presents essentially 5 themes. He talks about evolution, how our brains have evolved, and that we are cultural creatures. We have created culture as a way of dealing with the problem of surviving. And yet the way we use energy in our economy, the way that our culture has evolved is essentially destructive of natural capital. Because we're not really cognizant of the multiple forms of capital that are being impacted simultaneously. And this is where he talks about a little bit about human impacts on the environment, and finally ends up with the philosophy, mindfulness, and conscious awareness. This is why I talk about a little bit about the who, why it's important for people to understand who they are. One of the best parts of this film is that it's also very inspirational. Susan Kucera is a filmmaker who works with National Geographic, and she's included a lot of very beautiful footage in this film. But there's also a lot of the world's leading experts presenting ideas. Let's see, Thierry, you, not really. Excuse me. This film is about themes. This film is about understanding ideas that are at the forefront of thought. It's about really looking at new ways of thinking about sustainability without providing any kind of preset agenda or a preset framework or a preset set of beliefs. It's about understanding where we are today and being cognizant of the impacts that we're having, and taking those impacts and our awareness of them and making different choices. So this is a very inspirational film. I know a few folks at the University of Denver have used it. And so if we can go to the next slide. The pilot project is something that they're doing, a filmmaker and Jeff are doing together, about the themes and the ideas presented in the film, and how people feel inspired to take action based on those. What we're inviting you to do, what I'm inviting you to do, is use this in your classes. Take a look at it, show it. There's a study guide that is available. Ira has passed out the link. You can use that study guide as a way of guiding discussions. And then if students are doing something, or perhaps you have a research agenda that's oriented around one of these themes, feel free to make a short video. And these videos don't have to be Cecil B. DeMille, the parting of the Red Sea. These can be very short, very straightforward videos. If we could have the next slide, please. Two people who have participated in this. One is the Capet Institute for the Environment in the UK. What they're doing is research in complex adaptive systems and the emergent properties of systems. And then a very simple project is a sustainable community diorama done by the elementary and middle school people at the Gilpin County School District in Black Hawk. Now, this film is a tremendous film. It's won multiple awards all over the world. The voices in the film that you'll see are from experts that are renowned throughout the world as leaders in their fields. And so the ideas here are designed to inspire new ways of thinking without being tethered to any particular framework or way of looking at the world. And so I encourage you to do this. If you have questions about it, send me an email, or you can use the email right here, livinginthefutures@gmail.com. The website gives you more information about the film, but the pilot project information is what is one of those documents that you downloaded. We have a short preview. I'm not so sure that this is going to show. Myra, if we could go to the next slide. One slide down. You're going backwards. There we go. If you can click on the lower left-hand corner, we can actually watch it. There we go. This is the trailer. Not sure if we're getting sound.
And it will be here long after we're gone. Every living thing on it has evolved together over eons of time. And although we are part of the web of life, because we see it, we stand above it. From all that nature gave us, we have made a new world out of wilderness. Built great civilizations. It seemed there was nothing we could not do. Even the sky itself was not the limit. We see the symptoms of a reality we didn't expect. Have we reached the limitations of our human nature? Living here in the future's past.
The concept of world as a sort of way of distinguishing between human beings and everything else has evaporated. very small for what it does. If you think about what we're capable of, and to think it all comes out of a little object like that.
Our evolutionary impulses can be easily hijacked.
One of the problems with philosophy is that it isn't just in your head. Philosophy is everywhere in build space.
Including all the things I love that might be really ecologically problematic, but I love them anyways.
In the life of sentient beings, desire is inevitable.
Life is messy.
Doesn't sound like our war cry, doesn't sound like our song.
In the past, it's been conflict with other tribes that has brought human progress, such as it is.
Our brains are always creating distortions. We have no direct contact with reality.
We're a trial run.
Emergent behavior is all around us and can be fast-moving and unpredictable.
We have a real love for a way to feel how we want to feel faster.
Energy doesn't cost dollars. It really costs energy.
Energy is the currency of life. Here we discover the truth of who we really are, how we're connected to the world, for better or for worse. Could the solution we're looking for be inside us? We're humankind. Ingenuity is in our DNA, and we can visualize. What kind of future would you like to see? What are you willing to contribute towards creating that future? Who knows what will happen next?
All right, great, Ira. If you could advance the slide, we'll bring this to a close. Well, thank you. I want to thank you for being part of the webinar today. If you have questions or comments, please write them in the chat box. One of the most important things that you can do is to really question your worldview, question where you're coming from, question the assumptions. And since most of you are involved in education, I encourage you to take on the agenda that I've put forth today and look at how well your particular programs or your schools or your even your classes are really helping to promulgate some of these aspects around sustainability, and how well you're really forwarding some of these ideas. I invite you to use the film in your classes and to encourage your students to make short films around some of the topics that are presented. And then let's see if we can get these back to the filmmaker, and perhaps Jeff Bridges will put them into a future documentary, and we can start moving forward with some recognition. So again, thank you. That's all I have today. If you want to write some more questions in the chat box, that would be great.
Thank you, Anton. Great presentation. Apologies for the technical gremlins at the outset. There have been some interesting sidebar conversations ongoing in the chat box that some of you may want to scroll up and catch some of the links that have been offered to other materials. Anton, I don't know if you took a look at what Matt Polsky posted, and I'd be eager to hear your reaction. Matt's post and other posts are coming in, so it's moving the screen around. Matt indicates, still not commonly noted.
Oh yeah, I see that. That's very interesting.
Well, for those on the going to be listening on the recording, I just want to try to read that. Still not commonly noted, even when invoking education, Matt, starts with A, awareness and confidence to ask, what if I'm wrong? B, what piece of the earth, what piece of the truth might my my opponent know? C, where does common sense let us down? D, how can we recognize when we don't know what we don't know? E, better integration of intellectual and emotional. And F, what if mindset problems are much more pervasive than we realize? So if you caught that, Anton, love to get your reaction.
Well, I think that the mindset problem is critical. There is a wonderful book called Mindset, which is about a growth mindset versus fixed mindset. A lot of people have fixed mindsets, but our mindset, our growth mindset, is really necessary for understanding these sustainability issues. And really, mindset is the old example of a fish swimming in water. A fish doesn't really know it's in water, or the old problem of breathing. I mean, it's like oxygen, right? You know that you're not. The only time you know that you're conscious of it is when you're not getting enough. And so the mindset problems are extremely pervasive, and that's why I brought up about the worldviews. But we live inside worldviews, and we apply heuristics. But what we need is a different integrative worldview and a different set of heuristics. This is why we can look at what we don't know. We have to be really open to knowledge that may not currently exist, but that we may be pursuing through either the scientific method or through other ways of knowing. And the other ways of knowing are integration of the intellectual and emotional. This is what's actually talked about in the film, so I encourage you to watch it. And then what if I'm wrong is that's the whole basis of the scientific method, is that really essentially you are positing something and proving that it could be wrong. And so the real I guess tragedy here is that when we're educating within a mindset, when we're educating within a worldview, it's really hard to put forth the confidence to, first of all, acknowledge that worldview, and second of all, question it. Because what happens is you become ostracized. And the folks throughout history who have challenged worldviews. I mean, look at Dr. Martin Luther King. He challenged tremendous worldviews, yet he was ostracized. Throughout history, people have been ostracized. So it's kind of a dangerous game here that we're playing. But it's one that if we don't play it, we're not going to be around for another couple of generations. So great, that's a great question.
Moving on to some other comments, and there are quite a few, Anton, and we'll continue for a bit longer. We're not stopping artificially at the top of the hour. One attendee asks, after thanking you for the great material, how could it be used outside the USA? And I'm not sure whether she's referring to your slides or whether the invitation to participate in the Jeff Bridges project is open to those outside the USA, but you might as well answer both.
Actually, the Capet Institute is in the UK. So the participants have been right now from England and from the United States. I would urge you to contact either the filmmaker directly or send me an email. I'll put you in contact with the filmmaker. And these materials, they are making the materials available to folks in educational institutions for minimal cost.
Very good. Also, off the top of your head, Anton, do you happen to know the due date for submitting those videos?
There really, again, this is an open project. There really is no particular due date. The sooner you get them in, the more likely it is that the filmmaker will take them. They're both very busy. I mean, Jeff Bridges is very busy filming multiple films. The filmmaker is busy doing multiple documentaries. But one of the things that they have offered is to take the films that are submitted, and the filmmaker will include them with National Geographic footage. She works with some of the National Geographic videographers. And so the ideas that you would be presenting in your short videos will be augmented and professionally edited by the filmmaker.
moving away from some of the procedural and administrative issues to more substantive, a couple of the attendees went back and forth in the chat box about your use of the phrase more sustainable, with one gentleman arguing that either something is sustainable or it's not, and the respondent suggesting that it's a gradient, that it's not black and white. Where do you come out on that, Anton?
Sustainability is about time. If you, for those of you who play music, you know what a sustain is, right? You sustain your note as long as possible. Different life forms are sustainable for different periods of life. I mean, you look at the fruit fly lives, what, 48 hours or something like that. Some of the redwood trees live hundreds of years. The human lifespan is about 100 years or so, 90 or 100 years. The idea here is that first we acknowledge every single human society in history has collapsed. Every one. There are no, without exception, all societies have collapsed. So the term sustainable means within a reasonable lifetime, or within a reasonable period. What is that natural period? Well, that's really not known. I mean, humans are incredibly adaptable. Some cultures have lived for 1,000 years and then they disappear. Others appear for maybe 100 years and then they disappear. Some appear for 20 years and then they're gone. So the idea is that sustainability is about, first of all, selecting a time period. This is why I said that forward-looking and time selection are very important. What kind of time period do you want to really look at for your sustainability education? Do you want to look at 10, 100, 500, 10,000? What really is the time period that's appropriate? The Long Now Foundation has a clock that ticks once every 1,000 years. That's kind of interesting, and it rings the gong every 10,000. Is that appropriate? So more sustainable means extending something beyond its natural lifetime, or working to combine a set of elements that extend the lifetime of each element so that the system as a whole functions in a way that is more sustainable than its individual elements functioning alone. So sustainability is really about time, and more sustainable means how can we move beyond perhaps natural periods, or embrace natural periods in a way to organize a different system or a different set of systems that will enable humans and other life to flourish on the planet for a longer period of time.
Another thread of comments initiated by Madeline Charney was suggesting that we take a look at contemplative pedagogy. I'm not sure, Anton, if you are familiar with that approach, but Madeline put up in the chat box a link to an upcoming event on that approach, and I'm trying to pull it up.
Okay. I think that there are many approaches that are valid.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think there are many approaches that are valid. That's really one of the messages I'm attempting to get across today, is that sustainability is multifaceted. There are many approaches and there are many methods in pedagogy that can fit within the general framework that I've outlined. And so I think that there's lots of opportunity here to take a look at for different programs, and to look at them in reference to the framework that I put forth, and answer some of these questions. Are we really looking at systems issues? Are we really looking at longer time periods? What is it that we're all about in terms of our values and beliefs? I mean, there's many different options, and so part of the problem of sustainability is that there is no one right answer. There are many answers that can work together to form the whole.
Among the other items that were posted in the chat box, Matt Polsky had an article on the mindset challenges, pervasive mindset problems is the way he phrased it. Others noted the work of Joe Brewer, a culture designer who apparently has at least one relevant video posted. I think we can find that via Google search. Madeline notes that Brewer is in Costa Rica and he's part of a movement to build regenerative hubs around the world. Chuck Barlow asks the question, and I think we'll start to wrap up here. What about programs in schools that support K through 12 education? And I note that is a good segue into my closing, because what I will distribute tomorrow is an invitation to next week's SCC webinar, which will be what can university level educators in sustainability learn from the K through 12 space, which will be presented by my friend and colleague, Jamie Cloud. Anton, your thoughts on Chuck's question?
Well, I think that the film is actually an excellent vehicle for the K through 12 programs. As you can see from one of the projects, I believe it was the elementary school, just made a simple diorama of what they thought would be a sustainable community. And so the ideas can emerge from anywhere. And the real goal here with this invitation is to get people inspired, get them thinking about these issues in ways that are not constrained by any particular framework or way of thinking, or perhaps can exceed a mindset that the adults have. I mean, I think as adults we all have something called hardening of the attitudes, and we've adopted these mindsets. We've assimilated them so that they're subconscious. Well, that's just how we function. And so the kids, the K through 12 kids, can really break beyond that, and that's one of the goals of this film, is to inspire the next generation coming up to approach this problem in new and innovative ways. So I encourage the use of this film in the K through 12 classes.
An excellent place to bring our presentation to a close. Thanks so much, Anton, for a great webinar. Really appreciate it. I also appreciate all those who participated in the chat box. It was a wonderful discussion in the chat box with lots of useful information posted. Again, you'll all be receiving soon the announcement for next week's webinar, and check our website at curriculumforsustainability.org for updated information about our next steps. The question about the study guide, that was one of the items that's available at the link that I shared with all those who pre-registered. There were 3 items on that Google Drive that Anton set up. The study guide was one of them. With that, I will say thank you again to all on the line, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.